back, well, you were being warned to face more cost of living pressures. The RBA is set to raise interest rates again tomorrow, and the end of the fuel excise looms. Petrol prices will jump about 20 cents a litre from the 29th of September, meaning Australians are bracing for more pain at the Bowser and the supermarket checkout. Joining me live is Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Angus, thanks so much for your time. You fully expect rates to go up tomorrow? Do they need to?
Oh, I fully expect they will, Laura, and that's the reality. The market expects it. The Reserve Bank has strongly indicated that it's going to happen, and it tells us these cost of living pressures are now spread across many different areas. Mortgage repayments, obviously you've talked about fuel, electricity, but other items as well, building materials, furniture. We're seeing it, services, we're seeing it, it's very broad. And we need a government with a plan, a clear plan to deal with it. When you are thrown curveballs, as this government is being thrown, as we were when we were in government, you've got to respond, and you've got to respond in a timely and complete way and comprehensive way. And we haven't seen that yet from the Labor government. All we got was a jobs summit where the outcomes are more likely to raise prices through industrial disputation and industry-wide agreements rather than reduce prices. So this is a really big issue. We aren't seeing the response from the government, and we need to see a plan rather than making a bad situation worse. Well,
the fuel excise is going to be reinstated, it looks like, but prices have come down. Is it the right time or not?
Well, it's the right time to have a more comprehensive plan. That's the point we're making. So, the sorts of things we've been suggesting, like getting pensioners and veterans back into work or increasing their work rate. We saw a ham-fisted attempt to deal with this from Labor last week. It didn't go far enough. It was sunsetted, and it didn't include veterans. Those sorts of initiatives will make a real difference. Also managing their spending, and we're not seeing any management of spending from Labor. We drove a very significant improvement in the budget just before the election, but we haven't seen Labor building on that at all. These are the things that will make a difference, Laura. These are the things that will take pressure off households. These are the things that will make sure that there's less inflationary pressure in the economy, but nothing is forthcoming from Jim Chalmers or from Labor.
So you agree that it is time for the excise to return? I mean, you're the one that put an expiry date on it.
Well, we put an expiry date on it, but the point is there's broader cost of living pressures, and there's nothing forthcoming from Labor in dealing with those. That's the point. It's
okay, but I'm just trying to get to. So you're no longer calling for it to be extended?
We are calling for a comprehensive plan to deal with the cost of living pressures Australians are facing across the board. That's what we're asking for. And that's a very reasonable expectation. When we're in government, rightly, people expected of us to respond to the curveballs that were thrown at us in a tumultuous time. We are at the back end of that tumultuous time period, and Labor is not responding. They're not taking responsibility for being in government and responding to those very real pressures that Australians are facing. Look, it's the first of this month, September, we're seeing the first of the post-election interest rate increases going through to mortgage repayments. There's quite a delay in these things. By Christmas, they're going to be flowing through like a tidal wave, Laura. This is much broader than fuel. This is a broader cost of living challenge. And the best Labor can do is pay their paymasters, the unions, by offering them industry-wide agreements and strikes, which would raise the cost of living for Australians exactly as it did in the 1970s. I'm old enough to remember that and to have observed it. They were enormous pressures that were created by the unions, and they're talking about going back to that at a time when cost of living pressures for Australians are like we haven't seen since back in that time period.
So how would multi-employer bargaining actually push up prices and the cost of living?
Well, it pushes up wages and pushes up prices. I mean, this is the point that the Reserve Bank has been making, that if you get in a race between wages and prices, two things happen. Prices go up and real wages ultimately lose. This is a bad place to go, and it's why it took a long time during the 80s and into the 90s to ultimately deal with those circumstances. So Labor is throwing fuel on the fire right now. what we saw coming out of that job summit was fuel on the inflationary fire. This is exactly what they shouldn't be doing. There is no comprehensive plan. I think Jim Chalmers is like a deer in the headlights right now. He has no idea what to do. But it is very clear we need that comprehensive plan to deal with those broader cost of living issues.
OK, but Labor did take up your suggestion of allowing pensioners to work more before their payments are cut at all, up to $4,000. Isn't that inflationary as well?
Well, hang on. The first point I make is they're doing half of what we suggested, around half. They've excluded veterans and they've put a short sunset on it. Now, what we need to deal with inflation is stronger supply in the market. So all those worker shortages we're seeing out in small businesses, having people upping the number of hours they do or coming back into the workforce will reduce those inflationary pressures because it allows those businesses to produce more. It's simple economics, but it's sort of obvious, and there's a real opportunity to do that with aged pensioners and veterans. They've excluded the veterans altogether. They've only gone part of the way with the aged pensioners, and they've put a very short time frame on it.
I'm
not as confident as they are that they're going to deal with inflation in that sort of time frame.
Isn't it fair enough to put it in place, see how it goes, then extend it?
Well, why exclude veterans? I mean, that's extraordinary. This is an amazing workforce. These people who have these extraordinary skills, and yet they're being penalised by losing 50 cents in the dollar of their pension if they do extra work. Well, why would we exclude veterans from this? It's extraordinary. And why chisel and dime the nickel and dime? Sorry, the aged pensioners, and so offering them far less than we have proposed. Getting those people in the workforce, you only have to go out and talk to any cafe owner right now. They'll tell you they've got a shortage of people. It's having inflationary impacts. There's no question about that. We're seeing this right across the business community, particularly in small businesses, but more broadly as well. Getting more people into the workforce is an important part of what needs to happen here, and then not throwing fuel on the fire in the upcoming budget with more demand pressures. So this is straightforward economics. Jim Chalmers is showing no proactivity on it. We haven't seen any kind of response, and we need to see it.
Veterans are included.
Yeah, but how much? Have they included the entire amount? So it's very important that we see the full policy implemented. We need to see the full policy implemented, Laura. This is going to make a real difference. But when they nickel and dime this thing and make it substantially less than we have proposed, then it won't have the anti-inflationary impact that we want to see. And we know that, as I said. You just have to go out and talk to any small business owner right now.
OK. Before I let you go, any thoughts on Newspoll?
Well, look, as I always say, when you ask me this question, you've asked it to me many times. The only poll that ultimately matters is the poll at an election. You are seeing, of course, Labor having a honeymoon period. You'd expect it. But, reality really bites over time, and the truth is that Australians are facing serious cost of living pressures right now. We want to see those cost of living pressures alleviated. We want to see Australians getting a fair deal, and we want to see a government that is proactive in providing a comprehensive plan and response to those pressures.
Yeah, the polls were wrong once. Just ask Scott Morrison. Angus Taylor, thanks so much for your time.
Good on you. Thanks, Laura.